generations upon generations upon generations upon generations of wealth to you and yours. May you be in radiant health and supreme spirits. May you be in the purple, in your magic, in your intuition, in your imagination, and in your royalty. So we give
Yeah,
thanks. This is the day that we have made, and we shall rejoice and be glad in it. Look around today at what you've created and be glad. Be glad in every aspect of it. I am very thankful to again be with my host, Goddess, um, who is, radiating. And last week, after our filming the episode, I just felt the transmission within my body, and I was just like, wow, wow. And so I give thanks for you. And I know we wanted to take some more time with purity. Um, it's one of the most important topics that we can talk about for the goddesses, especially with the goddess awakening, the prophecy, the vision, and the call. So, goddess, I know that you're spilling over with things to share with us.
oh wow.
But I just wanted to just check in before I get into some of the questions that I have for you today. Um, because like I said, purity, I feel, is one of the most important topics that we can really speak about for the goddesses, especially right now. And last week we
Mm-hmm.
touched on what is purity, right? And this week I
Mm-hmm.
really want to get into um well, I'll start with what does it mean to live pure?
Mm. To live from your most elevated self, to live in the oneness of Christ, the consciousness of Christ. And that's what the goddess movement is about. It's about becoming one with the Christ consciousness. As I think I mentioned before, when they showed pictures of Christ, they showed what they call the Immaculate Heart.
Mm,
And so light coming through his heart, and you saw the halo over his head. So that means that his thoughts were pure and his heart was pure. In other words, there was no place in him where there was darkness, or as we would call it, evil, or negativity. His thoughts were so high that he was energetically vibrating at such a high frequency that people could touch him and be elevated to a space of being transformed, or as some would call it, healed,
mm,
because of the that he was holding. And as I mentioned before, I remember one time I fasted for 30 days, water and salad, and I was meditating every day. My vibration became so high, and it happened because I had my colon cleaned out. I went and got colonics, and then meditation and the fasting had me in such a high frequency. Um, and when you in that spirit realm, you don't know the difference between the physical and the spiritual, because you're kind of in two worlds. So the thing about becoming pure in thought and in body, uh, it elevates you spiritually to a place where your gifts come online very powerfully. You
mm,
know, so you have to be ready for that. You know, for the work that the goddess comes to do, a lot of the goddesses are going to have certain abilities that are mystical, but they need them, because working with in the shelter, I can give you a good speech. I can give you some general words of wisdom, but I can't really help you if I can't see where you're at. So, um, having those abilities will allow me to flow in the spirit in the way that God is guiding me and not from my own doing or thinking.
Thank you for
So
sharing.
pure,
Oh, go ahead. So
yeah,
purification.
well, is very important. And so people are concerned about what's going on with the food. Um, but
Mm,
what we're going to find out is that we really don't need 3 meals a day. You know,
right.
um, like I said before, anything can be food, but what you need is nutrition. Is to eat things that are nutritious. And one of the reasons why we need to clean our vessel out is because we're receivers, we're conductors and receivers of energy. And so in order to be a powerful conduit for the spirit, we have to get clear. And in getting clear, we'll be led to what to eat and what not to eat. We'll know, you know, what we should be eating and what we shouldn't be eating. But we'll learn that we don't need as much food. And what's interesting is that when you meditate every day, you don't even want food. You don't even feel hungry. It's something about that. It's like, oh, I forgot to eat today, because you're vibrating at such a high level that you
Mm,
don't have a desire to put a lot of food. You're not going to sit and eat big plates of, spaghetti or meat and things like that because you're just full in the spirit, full of the spirit, you know.
yeah.
But people don't realize is that, there's a saying in the Bible about your enemies are your step stools. And so what the enemy means for bad, God uses it for good. So people not eating a lot of food is really going to put them in a state of really cleansing, you know. So the stuff that's in their system that's been in there for years, they'll release that and there'll be a clearer channel for spirit.
And that brings me to the next question because I feel like the theme for today, when it comes to purification and purity for the goddess, one, recognizing what does it mean to live pure. But one of the things that I really noticed a lot is how do we purify the goddess conscious of the consciousness of war, right? And when you talked about make your enemies your footstool and things like that, like that really just led into this question because how do we constantly position a lot of times goddesses are positioning themselves consistently for impending harm that is coming either by some outside force externally or even internally, right? And that expectation of that attack, you know,
Mm-hmm.
creating a consciousness of war for the goddess, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, how do we purify that consciousness? How can we recognize when we are responding to an attack that isn't actually happening, you know, um, but it's so in our subconscious, right? Um,
Well, we don't. Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
no, you're fine. Yeah, but it's like this
Yeah.
consciousness that we have, like, you know,
Well, we don't. We, as I mentioned before, we don't live in that world. You know, there are many worlds. There are many states of consciousness. I like the story of Sidney Poitier. Sidney Poitier, are you familiar with him? He was a brilliant actor, and he lived on an island, and he never knew about racism. He never internalized that he was inferior. to any man.
Mm.
So his auric field, what he carried in his consciousness, permeate his aura. So men of any race had to honor him, and in a way that other black men weren't being honored. I
Mm.
remember in the 60s, when black people were protesting, against what was going on with the segregation. Sidney Portier was on TV kissing a white woman, slapped a white man, and married a white woman in real life. And those were things that, people were on TV saying, we can't get parts. This man was getting leading roles. And when he was on Oprah, he said, racism and him being inferior was never a part of his consciousness. So
Ooh.
that goes back to, and then the story with Mandela was, I saw him on Oprah, and I have both of their books. Is that when he saw the white man as the enemy when he was in jail, he felt oppressed. But when he sought to understand their fear, it it bridged a gap, and they were able to talk, you know, about the whole situation. And as a result, he was let out of jail and became who he became. But he stopped seeing him as enemy or his self being separate from them, and that
Mm.
changed the whole vibration of what he was experiencing. It.
Mm.
Jesus
Wow.
was talking. He was talking about how thoughts create. The only difference between a rich man and a poor man is how they think. It's consciousness. Rich people live in a whole different world. Certain things don't even exist in their world. They know nothing about it because they live in a whole different life. And the reason why they live in a whole different life is because of the consciousness and what they're creating with their mind. Their mindset, their belief system is what's driving the car,
Mm.
meaning our vehicle, which is, you know, when I was in the shelter, I would tell the girls in the shelter, when you catch a bus, most people, you standing at the bus stop, you look down the street, you see a bus coming. What's the first thing you do when you see that bus coming? What would you do?
You looking when if you're looking down the street and you see a bus coming, well, and I'm waiting on the bus,
Mm-hmm.
um, look, make sure I'm at the bus stop so I can get
And
picked.
what else? You're looking at the bus to see what? You
Um, see if
go
see if
ahead.
it's gonna stop. I don't know.
No, the right bus.
Oh, right. To
Even
see if it's the right bus.
though it's coming down the road. If you know the Woodward bus comes down Woodward, even though it's an instinctual thing, even though you know that it's a bus coming, you always look up to make sure that it's the right bus. Is
Mm.
this the Woodward bus? I see this bus coming. So people are like buses. People come into your life and they'll talk to you and they'll tell you based on the conversation where they are in their journey and where they're going or have the potential to go.
Mm.
So if you connect with them, then you're going to be a part of that world. And whatever they're creating within that world, then it becomes a part of your world.
Mm. So what I hear you saying when it comes to purifying the consciousness from war, it's about one, recognizing that you don't live in a war zone, and
Mm-hmm.
so having your consciousness not live there. And the other
Mm-hmm.
is your associations, who you're associating with.
Yeah.
And if
Who
you're
you're talking to.
associating with people, who you're talking to, and if you're constantly in conversations of war, and that's how the goddess can purify her consciousness of the war.
I had a young lady, I had a woman that was talking to me, a friend of mine, and she would always say to me, the devil is busy. But she also was telling me that at night that this demonic energy was trying to have sex with her at night. So
Mm.
she would be fighting with this demon or dark spirit that was trying to have sex with her. And I told her that if me and her are going to continue to talk and have conversation, I need her not to say things like the devil is busy because you're putting it in my ear. And if you look at the ear, it's like an embryo. It looks like a embryo in the womb. So what
Mm.
you take in and and think about and focus on, you give it life. So I told her, I said, you gave your life to God, right? And she says, yes. So why wouldn't you say God is busy
Ooh.
instead of the devil? I said, because
Yeah.
when you say the devil is busy, then you're inviting him into your world. You're you're making a statement in
Mm.
that, and you're calling that forth into your world. You say this is a house for God. God is busy in here.
Right.
There's only God here. So don't stop saying that. And when she did, the attack stopped. I said, go through your house and pray and say, there's only God here. There's only God here. And take that out your vocabulary. The devil is busy. No, God is busy.
Yes.
Even if something negative, what we would deem to be negative would happen in your life, if you say God is busy, that what we would deem negative will become a positive for you and for others.
Ooh,
Because it mhm.
I said, thank you. Thank you for
And
saying
that's where, well, that's where it's all good comes from. When people say it's all good,
so God.
God is good. You know, my sister was dying of cancer, right? And she was very, very close to God. She prayed every day. She had all this spiritual writings around her house. God was very important to her because she had a really hard time. She had a husband that was on drugs, and that was very challenging for her because she loved him. She prayed for him and everything. But when she got struck with the cancer, um, she embraced it. I asked her, was she scared? She said no. And when she went to surgery, she told me that if I was going to be emotional, not to come because
Mm.
she didn't want to do that. She said, I'm okay. She said, this is between me and God. And when her body was, becoming, thin, and she had a catheter, she was in a wheelchair, and she almost looked like a skeleton. I asked her, I said, she was telling me that one night, how a rough night. And I told her, that I was so sorry that, she was going through this. I said, this must be difficult. I know it's got to be difficult for you. She said, it's not difficult. It's just different.
Mm.
It's just different.
Ooh.
And when she was dead, she wouldn't take no medicine because she wanted to be alert for her visitors when they came to her house to see her. So she faced it with God.
Mm.
And I remember one day I was crying because to see her that way. And God said, stop looking at her body and look at her spirit. And what I saw in my mind when I reflected back, her body was full of light. She
Mm.
was full of light. She had a glow about her. So even though her body wasn't in pain, her spirit was more alive than I had ever seen it. She was in a
Mm.
place of peace. And she was just giving out love. She invited people to come see her and just love on her. And she loved on them and thanked them for being a part of her life. And in that moment, she became my hero
Mm.
because she taught me how to um, elevate or stay elevated in the midst of a very dark time, to be able to hold the light even when things what we would seem dark, you know,
Wow. So
consume you.
what's really powerful about what you're saying is that reminder that no matter where we find ourselves, no matter what is going on in our lives, as a goddess, you have dominion to state the claim, that things are within their divine place.
Mhm.
Everything is divine. And so I know we have like 10 minutes left, and I really wanted to get into, we talk about
Mhm.
revelations, right? And
Right.
um and within revelations, a lot of people say there's this thing called there's wars and rumor of wars, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And within the revelations. And so, what about the wars? And so, but sometimes we're looking at wars of countries fighting each other, like World War III or things like that. And people have been looking for those wars. But the
Mhm.
wars that we've been hearing a lot about that really need our attention were the wars within our relationships, the wars within the parent and child dynamic, the mother and daughter dynamic, the masculine and feminine, friends and community, right? Whether
Mhm.
it's
Mhm.
individualism or whether I'm going to be in community, right? The internal
Right.
wars between different parts of ourselves, our past
Mhm.
self and the
Mhm.
self that we're
Eyes.
becoming. Yeah,
My eyes. A little
you
bit.
okay?
Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. And what happens, when everyone is watching their back because the wars that we're looking at, the wars that people have been looking for, they've just been looking for bombs to blow up the United States and all of that, when the wars have been happening at home. They've been happening within the self, they've been happening
Well,
within our families and communities.
all that is a separation from God. I think I mentioned I had a young lady in the shelter who was at war with her mother. Her and her mother were physically fighting. She was
Mm,
like 17. She found out in the shelter that she was pregnant, and
mm,
her body was going through all these changes. And I was working midnights, and she said, I want my mommy. I want my mommy because I guess she felt like her mother would help her, what she was going through, and she wanted to be nurtured. She was scared. I called her mother in the middle of the night, and I told her, "There's somebody here that needs to talk to you." Make a long story short, the mother started crying. She started crying, and they was like, "I love you." And her mother said, "Can she come home?" And I said, "When?" She said, "Tonight." I said, "Okay." It's 4 o'clock in the morning. She's packing her bags, and this 80-year-old man comes to the door to pick her up and takes her home. And
mm,
so, she's calling me to let me know how things are going. She's back home with her mother. She called me one day and she said, "It's happening again." Her and her mother was starting to get into it. She said, "Can you come and talk to her?" And so I went to talk to the mother. And as a staff, a part of the shelter, I'm not talking about God to the client, right? So, excuse my eyes just running today. And the mother, got a phone call, and they had her other child at school was sick. So the girl that asked me to come, she had to go leave and get her sister, which left me with the mother.
mm,
And I asked the mother, I said, "Can I take off my hat and just talk to you woman to woman? Can I take off my work hat and just talk to you woman to woman?" And she says yes. And I told her, I said, "You got a spiritual problem here, you and your daughter. Why you keep arguing?" And I said, "You can't sit down at the table with the same thing on your plate and expect to have a different meal." And I said, "Find a place in your home, a chair, a table, and put your Bible there, water there, whatever, and let that be your God space. And when you deal with anything, take it to God first so that you can see clearly on how to move in that situation, how to speak into that situation that will bring resolve and peace and harmony.
mm,
Because the perspective that you're looking at it at is only going to create disharmony and hurt and pain. So you got to look at it in the spirit. So that's what's going on. Even in my situations with my daughter, we had some situations, and I had to sit with it and say, "Okay, why are me and her having an issue?" And it was my perspective of how I was looking at her, and God showed me her in another light. I was able to come to her differently.
mm. And that's the importance of us being able to sit and ask God, let me see through the lens of divinity. Let me see through the eyes of the Divine Mother, right? As a goddess, you are also the representation on the earth of the mother of creation. And so I like how you said the way our perspectives and the way that we see things as goddesses can create certain realities, right? And if we're
Mm-hmm.
operating in
Mm-hmm.
defense and we're organizing ourselves in defense, um, then we're creating more opportunities for us to be in that space of defending ourselves. And so the
Yes.
goal is to eventually become, again, more soft, right? And just recognize that instead of defense and thinking, who's against me? Thinking, what am I creating,
Right.
right? Instead of
Who's
how do I protect
wrong?
myself? Thinking, how
Yes.
do I
Yes.
cultivate peace? You
Yeah.
know,
The goddess is about oneness with God, and that's when Jesus said, when you see me, you see the Father. Me and the Father are one.
mm,
So when you see the goddess, you see the divine feminine. You see God working through the feminine energy as the divine mother of creation. And what we have to remember is that our life is not our own. It's really not our own. We're here on assignment. We're here to fulfill a mission and a purpose to be the light in the darkness. And the only way that we can do that is stay in the light and in the light and be enlightened by everything that we see and experience.
so I want to ask our audience something. Um, One, if you are enjoying this content and it's bringing value to your life, please like and subscribe and leave a comment. And here's a question that I would like for you all to comment below. What would you create if you no longer believed that you had to prepare for a war?
Mm-hmm.
What would you be creating? This is something I want our audience to answer in the comment section. If you decide that, you know, this content is so valuable to your life and you want to give back value,
Mm-hmm.
um, we don't at the Goddess Awakening accept any monetary donations. However, you can email us at thegoddessawakening@gmail.com, spelled goddess spelled GODIS, the Goddess Awakening at gmail.com. And we'll send you information about ink and paper and even a printer that you can purchase and send the actual products, not the money. Okay. We just want, Goddess wants to be able to get out this information to the collective of goddesses, to get the image of the goddess in the mind of every woman in the city of Detroit and eventually the United States. And so, with that mission and that being the goal, we would, we welcome those donations of paper and ink. And before we leave, we have 1 minute left. Goddess, is there anything that you still feel like on your heart that you want to share? Or I have a closing question if not.
Yeah, well, we're here to the world, and the new world is coming through our imagination. God is going to show us, the vision of what is to be created during this time, and we're here to hold the immaculate concept for humanity, for the transformation and evolution of humanity. We're going to think it into existence. We're going to dream it into existence, and we're going to speak it into existence.
Mm.
One world is dying, but a new one is emerging. Eventually, the light of the the dark will give power. No, I'm sorry. The light
Yes.
is the most powerful in the dark. So
Mm-hmm.
stay in the light.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you so much.